Good evening, abundant marriage family. I missed you guys last week. We had a little break last week. It was Thanksgiving week. How was your Thanksgiving? I hope you had the absolute best time with family, as we have so much reason to be thankful. And soon, Christmas is right around the corner. So in that week of Christmas, we're also going to take a break. But man, I missed you guys. So I hope you guys had an awesome Thanksgiving. And we are back together. We are back together because there's a lot of things I want to cover. And this topic was brought to you by Renee Leonardi, he's nodding his head no. Renee isn't particularly fond when I share stuff that happens with us, but he's used to it by now. It doesn't matter if I'm preaching or if I'm talking to you guys. I think it's best when we learn from the examples of others, and we're not perfect, far from it. And I want it to be clear to you guys that those who have abundant marriage are not those who, somehow do not experience any type of problems or arguments or disagreements. No, those things happen, but the difference is, how are these topics handled? How are these disagreements handled? And I can tell you that in the beginning it wasn't always this way. Man, Renee and I would go at it. And so there are specific things, specific steps that we did in our marriage, specific areas that we were intentional about. And if I can prevent you from, if I can prevent a fight or an argument or a disagreement in you, I would like to do that. I want you to bypass sort of our dead ends so that you can quickly arrive at your abundant marriage. And so for those who are joining us, welcome. I see more of you coming in. As you know, I'm going to be looking here to the side because this is the way that I see who's coming in. So, Lisbeth, welcome. Glad to have you. Glad you are joining us. And today, what we're going to be wrestling with here at Abundant Marriage is this. Do you feel like your husband just wants you for sex? I lost count. How many women, how many wives come to me and they say, Amanda, I feel like my husband just wants me for sex. And if I can be honest, that's a little bit how I felt this morning, Renee. That's a little bit how I felt this morning. And so I want to take you guys on this journey and share sort of what happened with us and how this actually brought us closer together. And I believe that if you sort of take these steps, if you take these tools and you apply it in your marriage, I want to see what happens the next time you have this feeling, wives, that my husband just wants me for sex. And I know, men, I get it. Husbands, I get it. Which is why Renee says, what? That's not true. I don't just want you for sex. But I'm going to show you how we arrived at the place in which we did. And so this happened this morning, and look, we're not mad at each other. The silence treatment isn't going on. And so I want you to experience the same. And so I actually asked you guys earlier this week a few things. And one of the things that I asked is, when you are angry in your marriage, how do you solve that anger? What do you do in your anger? And I mean the majority of you, if not all of you, said silence. I stay in silence. And so I want to show you how, silence at times can be useful and honestly even necessary. But do you feel at times that despite you trying to communicate, whether it's through silence, because silence is also communication, despite your attempts at communicating, whether it's through words or through silence, that you get nowhere. It's like a dead end and you have the same arguments over and over and over and over again. That it seems like you somehow feel unheard, unseen, that you can't get anywhere with your spouse, and that as you guys fight, there's no solution. And to me, one of the scariest places is that it just brings pain rather than an opportunity for there to be closeness in your marriage. And so usually it's around this topic. I've found that women, maybe not all wives, but at least generally speaking, wives have had this thought in their mind, my husband just wants me for sex. It's something that quite often comes up. And so I'm going to share with you sort of what happened between Renee and I, and then I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, and then I'm going to use this story, this scenario, and I'm going to break it down. I'm going to break it down in what Renee and I used to do, how we used to solve this conflict, and then how we have been solving it lately, recently. Because again, all these things are learned, which is why the Abundant Marriage course is a journey that you take on that takes your marriage from mediocre to abundant, because you start learning these tools and you start having these aha moments and these light bulbs start going off in your head. And it's not that from now on, now it's going to be perfect, no one is going to mess up. Of course not. But it's when these things happen, your mind is reminded, oh, we study this, I learned this, and then you go and you apply, and bad habits turn into good habits. And so this is what happened. Last night, Renee approaches me with oh, do you want a massage? I don't know about you, but that's usually how it starts here. And I said, oh man, this massage is not good. This massage has what is it?
Alternative motives.
Alternative motives, that's right. This massage has alternative motives. But I really wanted a massage because River and Reed, they were crazy. Well, they're always crazy. But River and Reed are just a very high energy. My mom says that that's what I get because I'm very high energy, right? And River and Reed are the climb the trees, drive the ATV. They're nonstop. And so I consistently have to keep an eye on them because I'm just literally scared that they're going to kill themselves. And so I was like, oh man, on one hand I want a massage, on the other hand I know where this is going to lead. But I said, okay, fine, I'll take the massage. And so Renee starts giving me a massage, and then I said, oh boy, here we go. And I said, oh, and I always attempt, right? I'm just so tired. And Renee insists. And long story short, I give in. And this is how my mind operates. I don't know about you. So I'm tired. You know, I would have much rather gone to sleep in all honesty. But then my mind goes to here. Man, Renee, you know, has been so kind, and he's been so good, and he's been so loving and compassionate and generous. He's been so good with the boys. My mind goes there. And so, in sight of all these things, keeping all these things in mind, it motivated me. It compelled me. And so, sure enough, this always happens to me. I don't know if this happens to you, ladies. My initial reaction is to hesitate because I'm so tired. I have so much to do. I have so much on my plate, on my mind, and I think this is why. Yeah, very good, Will. Right? He insists. That's for sure. He doesn't give up. And so, but usually after I'm like, oh, Renee, thank you for insisting. I have found, at least for the wives in Abundant Marriage, that usually the husband, he's the gung-ho, he's the let's do it. And usually the wives are like, oh, do we have to do it today? I had one wife tell me, she goes, Amanda, I usually like to shower right before my husband comes home. Because if he sees me naked, it's game over, right? And so she says, one time she heard him coming in, and she says that she ran. I mean, she ran across the bedroom, put her clothes on, and was like, oh, like she was already sweating and had to take another shower just because she wanted to guarantee that he would not see her naked. And so, usually after I said, you know, Renee, thank you for insisting. That was awesome. You're great. And whatever. So I usually find that the husband, you know, I don't know, he knows that something good's going to happen. The wife is so distracted with tired or with the kids or this or that, that usually it's after the fact that the wife was like, hey, that was pretty good, right? We'll do it again next time. And so anyways, Renee, after that, whatever, it was pretty late. Well, late for us is like 9:30. It was pretty late, so we went to sleep. We're doing a 40 days of prayer for, I believe it's our nonprofit. We're doing these 40 days of prayer, and so we're doing it at 5 o'clock in the morning. We have about 40 people there, couples and teenagers and young adults, and it's really, really a cool group. And so we woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We did our prayer thing. It's been so cold. Renee and I are such babies for the cold. I mean, we are just yuppies, okay? And it was too cold, and I was like, oh, Renee, like, should we go? Renee's like, I mean, it's too cold. I mean, what was it? It was probably like in the 50s, and we were like being babies about it. And so I was like, okay, so after prayer, we just both read, you know, spent time in the Bible, spent time in prayer. And then, although we couldn't go to walk, my assumption was that we would hang out in bed together, and that we would talk, and that we would go back and forth, and that would be our time. Well, Renee something else planned for himself. Renee gets very obsessive when he likes something, and his latest has been ATVs, right? He loves buying ATVs and fixing it up and reselling it. He loves that. He likes to take things apart and put things back together. And so as soon as we read our Bible, my assumption was that we would stay in bed, that we would cuddle, that we would hang out, that we would talk. And Renee, he gets up and he already goes to the computer and he starts doing his research, that he has to buy a light here and he has to buy a handle for this one and whatever. And so in that moment, my mind went to Renee just wants me for sex, because my mind went to, he got what he wanted last night, and so he doesn't need to give me attention, and he doesn't need to spend time with me. And so in that moment, I was silent, and I'm going to tell you, as I sort of pinpoint all the moments that I want you guys to take away this evening. But in that moment, I was silent, and then after my silence, I had a conversation with him. And so here was sort of how this conversation went down. Typically, before, in the past, when I was silent because I wanted Renee to notice that I was angry, right? And typically, this is what happens in marriages that are mediocre. But what we learn in the Abundant Marriage course is there are moments where we need to be silent, where it's appropriate to be silent, and there are two types of silence. The first silence is because you're genuinely reflecting. You are sort of going back and forth in your thoughts with God, and you're thinking, what is the most appropriate thing to say right now? How can I best express myself as to not offend my spouse, but so that this conflict, this disagreement, or my sadness, or my anger can be used to bring us closer together? Because in my mind, disagreements and arguments and conflict, it can be used to bring couples. I have seen with my own eyes that it's a positive tool to bring people closer together. And so I was sort of, and again, Renee, can you hit the close there? My phone's about to die. Hey, Jessica. Hello, welcome. Hey, Megan. And so, sort of backtracking here, what I want for the couples in Abundant Marriage to see and to notice is that we can use these moments to bring us closer as a couple. And so I was reflecting, I was going back and forth with God, and in that moment I chose to be silent. And again, as I said, there are two types of silence. There's a type of silence that says, I want him to find out that I'm angry, and I'm just going to be quiet all day long, all week, sometimes all month, if it takes, so that he can notice. And let me tell you something, ladies. Most of the time, your husband will not notice. I've lost count at how many times I would do that right when we got married. And I would stay silent all day long, sometimes all week long. And Renee would not notice that I was silent. I'd be like, are you kidding me? I was mute. And if you know me, you know how incredibly difficult it is for me to give anyone the silent treatment. But the problem with the silent treatment, when we use it in this way, it's that it's not helpful to us, it's not helpful to our spouse, and definitely not helpful to our marriage. Because before, when we had just gotten married, I would just be like brewing in my anger and my frustration and my resentment, and that was no good for anyone. Now, if we're using silence, the second type of silence, to reflect, to meditate, to make sure that we sort of have a plan and how we're going to go there. The silence is not to offend or to punish, but it serves for us so that we make sure that when we speak, we are speaking words of life and not words of death. And so again, I first stayed silent. After I spent some time in my silence and wrestling with God, and there I was reading my Bible, and all the while thinking, man, I feel like Renee just used me for sex last night, and now since he got what he wanted, then that's it. He's checked out. He's checked out. He got what he wanted, and that's it. And then after, I decided that I was going to communicate my silence. I was going to communicate my silence to Renee, because I can assure you, as I was silent in bed, Renee had no idea what was going on in my mind, because Renee doesn't read minds. And your husband does not read minds. And so Renee was having a jolly old time researching ATVs. He's thinking, we had a great night last night. We just woke up in prayer. I'm here in my ATV. He thinks everything is okay. Little does he know, right? Little does he know what's going on in my mind. And so there's a book that I'm reading. It's called The Dance of Connection by Dr. Harriet Lerner. And she talks about how we need to be able to communicate with our authentic voice. Now, I'm not going to give you all of her definition about what it means to communicate in your authentic voice, but I'll give you some. Some of the sort of bullet points that she lists there in the book is that we need to openly share our competencies and also our problems and our vulnerabilities. So in that moment, my mind went there. I need to be open with Renee about what's going on in my mind because he cannot help me. We cannot get further in our relationship if I'm not willing to be open with my successes, but also with my frustration. The next way we are going to use our authentic voice is by listening and asking questions. So it allows the other person, A, to explain themselves, and it also allows us to gather information about what is going on. So I also, as I communicated to Renee what was going on, I needed to put myself in the mindset that I was going to listen to whatever Renee had to say, and then we can go back and forth being curious about each other's point of view and perspective through asking questions. Another way to use your authentic voice is you have to have the ability to express what you're thinking, what you're feeling, state differences, and also allow your spouse to do the same. Which is why I always recommend going to a quiet place and staying in silence, not to punish anyone else, not as a silent treatment, but so that you can reflect what are the things that you are feeling. Why are you angry? Why are you upset? You need to start thinking about your thinking so that you know what's going on with you, because if you don't know how to express it, if you don't know what's going on with you, no one's going to know. Also, it's important that we define what are our values, what are our principles, what are our priorities, and clarify limits, clarify boundaries. When we express and use our authentic voice, as Dr. Harriet Lerner is saying, it facilitates great communication in our relationship. Because here's the thing, if we are not willing to speak authentically to our spouses, it will begin to deteriorate our relationships because we will be extremely frustrated. And now I want to caution you with this, because I think it's important that I capitalize on making you mindful about the time in which you have conversations. So I decided that I was going to bridge the conversation with Renee in this moment because we slept well last night. We both had already spent time in prayer and Bible study. River and Reed, it was still going to be another 45 minutes until they would wake up. And so I felt like the time was appropriate. Now, I don't know about your husband, but Renee doesn't work very well when he's hungry. So if I'm going to bring a big topic for Renee, I know that I'm not going to do it if he's just come home from work, he's hungry, he's tired. I'm not going to do that. I also don't want to bridge these huge topics just before bed because, again, Renee and I sleep with the birds, and so by 9 o'clock, we're checked out. I also know, and this is why it's important that you learn each other. I know that it would not be wise, hey, Daisy's with us, and Obetha, and these are some of the people who have been joining us in the 40 Days of Prayer. Hi, guys. I also know that if I have a conversation with Renee when he is driving, it's going to go through one ear and out the other. So you need to know your spouse well so that you know the best and most appropriate time to have these conversations. This is what Ecclesiastes reminds us. Ecclesiastes 3 says this: to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance. Verse 5, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain, a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, and finally, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to be silent and a time to speak. Oh, it continues. A time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And so, it is important that we know the best time. Be reasonable. Know your spouse. Ask your spouse. There might be moments where you say, I know I've often asked Renee, hey, is this a good time for us to bridge this topic? We need to respect people's boundaries and people's limits. And forcing someone to have a conversation when they are not ready or willing to have a conversation is going to take us nowhere. And with that, it's also important that you prayerfully ask God for help when you have these conversations. James 1:5 says this, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally without reproach, and it will be given to him. We must ask God for wisdom, knowledge, discernment, understanding. I don't know about you, but I don't trust myself to have conversations with Renee without the aid of the Holy Spirit. I don't trust myself enough to come here and speak to you all without first praying and seeking God and praying and saying, Lord, use me that I might deliver a message so that these marriages can become abundant. So when you and I enter conversations, any type, especially sensitive conversations, we need to make sure that we are armed with the armor of God. Do not go to battle without Jesus Christ. And so again, right, I stayed silent, but then I communicated my silence, and it sort of went like this. Renee, I feel, look at the word I'm using, I feel, because feeling and fact are two different things. I know, based on fact, that Renee does not just want me for sex. He has shown that, he has expressed that. I am certain. The fact is, Renee is not just married to me for sex. Because if so, that's very expensive sex. Oh, that's very expensive sex for him to be married for me, all this stuff. Raise, river, and read with me, make a life with me, and all the things that entails in marriage. That just seems like too high a price to pay just for sex. And so that's the fact. But my feeling in that moment said, Renee just wants me for sex. And so I communicated to him this. Renee, I feel this way. I know it's not true. I know the fact. I know the reality is that is not true, but this is how I'm feeling. And he listened, and he listened, and he listened, because that's what Renee does. He listened and listened and listened. And he took that, and now it was his time to be silent, and so he just stayed with that information. You have to see how it works. What is the dynamic of your relationship? I know that usually when I come to Renee with something heavy, that he just sort of marinates, and I need to then give him space to do what I had just spent the last 20 and 30 minutes doing in my bed when he was researching ATVs. And so I need to respect that. Back in the beginning of our marriage, I would say like, hey, I just showed you that. So tell me, what are you thinking? Are you kidding me? Come on, Renee, hurry up, hurry up. Renee and I are very different. And so I've learned to respect that Renee thinks about situations for a very long time versus me. But it's also the reason why he ends up saying less nonsense than I do, because he thinks so much before he speaks. And so I said my piece. I said, hey, I know the fact is that you are not just with me for sex, but right now I'm feeling that way because we had a great night last night, and I really wanted to connect with you this morning. As much as it is important for you to have physical intimacy with me, and I love that you want to have sex with me, I love it, but I also just need more of you. And I expressed it to him in this way. I said, listen, Renee, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but into my soul, because I know it's going to produce a better sex life. And so I left him with that. And as I left him with that, I then went sort of back and forth with God, and I did the whole fact and feeling talk with God. And I think that this is exactly what we find in Genesis 12. You see, in Genesis 12, we read the story of a man named Abraham. You guys might know him as the father of faith. And God sends Abraham, hey Giselle, God sends Abraham to new territory. He says, listen, Abraham, I'm going to make of you a great nation. And so leave your home, leave your comfort, and go to the unknown. And when Abraham arrives, the Canaanites have already inhabited this land. And in that moment, Abraham's feelings said, what in the world? Why would God bring me to a place that people are already living here? Did God mess up? The fact was, and when you read, there are commentaries that said in that moment, Abraham had reason to doubt God's plans. However, he did not lose faith in God, because the fact was that God was with him based on his character, that he is good and long-suffering, that the promises he makes he will keep. So Abraham's faith was sustained based on who God was, not on circumstances. And so as I was sort of going back and forth with God, God reminded me of this story of a man named Abraham who had reason based on his feelings to doubt God's plan, but because of the character of God and because of his relationship with God, he knew that oftentimes fact and feelings, they sort of are at war with each other, but he chose faith based on fact. You know, it's in these moments and in these opportunities that I often ask God, right now, this conflict, this disagreement, use it for your glory. Use it for your glory. I've tried to change my mindset. And listen, I'm not always successful, okay? I'm not always successful. But during trials and during things, I say, Lord, help me understand that although I know that God does not send evil our way, God does not send harm our way, He's a good Father. But oftentimes He allows certain things so that through it, He can mold our character. So that at times we need to go through the furnace so that we can become who Christ wants us to be. I want to read this to you, and it says this. God permits, look, I'm using the word permit and not send. God permits trials to assail His people, that by their consistency and obedience, they themselves may be spiritually enriched. And so often when these circumstances and situations happen, I say, Lord, in what way can I be spiritually enriched right now? The very trials that task our faith most severely and make it seem that God has forsaken us are to lead us closer to Christ. That He shows them their own weaknesses and teaches them to lean upon Him. And so in this moment I said, Lord, what aspect of my character? Remember, I tell you guys all the time, marriage is the greatest school for character development. And so my initial reaction is to literally say, Renee, you just want me for sex. You got what you want, right? You got what you want, and that's it. Now you don't even care. But as I reflect with God, as I go through feelings and fact with God, I say, Lord, help me communicate this so that I don't push Renee away, but that we can use this to grow our marriage and to help your marriage. Renee, we got a problem there. And so then after I gave this information to Renee, and Renee sat with it, he came downstairs, and then of course, something else happened. He came downstairs, and I was already the boys had already woken up at this time. And so I go downstairs and I start playing with them. So I'm in their room, I'm playing with them. And I know that Renee came downstairs because I hear him in the kitchen. But I'm not entirely sure what he's doing in the kitchen. And so I'm playing with the boys. I come out and Renee has made himself breakfast. And I looked at him and I said, man, like, you couldn't have asked if the boys wanted some, or, you know, if you could make it for all of us. And he just thinks, oh man, here we go again, right? She's just told me that I wasn't caring for her and that I just went into my ATV, and I almost saw the look on his face like, I messed up again, right? And he goes, oh, and he starts saying, I thought you had eaten breakfast already, I didn't know you were hungry, I didn't know you wanted, and that goes back and forth a little bit. And then we say our goodbyes. He has to go to work. He actually went to go get the oil in my car changed, and so he leaves. And so then I texted him. I texted him and I said, listen, Renee, this is what I started off this standoff. And so I said, Renee, this is the standoff. The standoff is this. Men want sex. I'm not saying that women don't want sex, but typically men are more gung-ho about it. Men want sex, and women, they want sex, and they like sex, and they desire sex, but really women want connection. Women want intimacy. Women want vulnerable conversations. At least most women. And so I said, this is the perfect standoff, because you want sex, women want quality time and attention and compassion, and surely when there is compassion, passion will follow. And I said, it's the perfect standoff. I said, I love that you want sex, and I love that you want to have sex with me. I love it. It's great. It's the perfect standoff. And so it's like, you fill me and give to me what I need, and I fill and give to you what you need. It's the perfect cycle. This is how God created. It's a giving and receiving. It's kind of like how nature does it, right? The plants and the trees, they set us off oxygen, and then we release carbon dioxide. It's perfect. The flowers are there to give food to the beasts. It's giving and receiving. It's the perfect cycle of selfless service. And I said, I think it's great. And then I said this to him. And I said, Renee, and we are going to be in this cycle for the rest of our lives. Till we die, it's the perfect standoff. And so I said to him, however, could you not make it so obvious? Meaning, because we had sex, I don't want you to start the cycle again with your attention and your compassion and you doing things when it's getting closer to the day that you want sex again. Why can't we start the cycle as soon as sex ends, and then we restart the cycle? Because the reality is, the sooner you start the cycle, the more apt and willing and ready will I desire and want to have sex with you. And so, before, right, in the beginning of marriage, I would have just let Renee have it. You just want me for sex, and it's crazy, and you're not compassionate, and this and this and that. I would have attacked his character. But this time I said, Lord, help me present to Renee, help me have him understand that our hearts need to be connected, that our minds need to be connected, because sex will be better if I am emotionally intimate with Renee. That the physical will be excellent if our hearts are connected. And so Renee responds to, I'm sorry, you're right, I wasn't considerate this morning. And oh man, I've told you guys before, Renee is so much better at apologizing than I am. Renee is really so much better at just saying, hey, you're right, I'm sorry, I'm going to try again. I usually have some excuses up my sleeves. And so, if one of you, I don't know if it's you husband or you wife, who are more willing to accept blame and to apologize, by all means do it, because you know what it does? It completely brings the walls down. And so he said that, and then he says, but let me ask you a question. And so he sent me a voice recording this time, and he says this. He goes, I'm on my way to change the oil of your car. Does this demonstrate to you that I love you and I care for you? And so the reason I love this, and listen, this is a learned behavior, okay guys? This is learned. Renee didn't always ask me these questions. Again, it's been a lot of trial and error between the two of us, which is why I'm going to give you this information so that you don't have to repeat the mistakes that we've repeated. And so Renee asked me this question, and two things happened. Number one, I appreciate him asking questions because it means that he is curious. It means that he cares enough to enter into this dialogue and to sort of go back and forth with me. And listen, I would recommend you have this conversation in person. Okay, Renee and I have been pretty good with sending voice recordings or even text messages because I know the voice of Renee. When Renee sends me a text message, because I know him very well. With anyone else in this world, I do not have conversations like this via text or via phone because it's not going to work. But with Renee and I, and sometimes, it's not all the time, and sometimes this wasn't a huge thing, and we continued the conversation because he had an appointment he had to go, and so we continued it. And so he asked me that question, does it make you feel loved and cared for? And so I responded with, I absolutely appreciate that you're going and you're changing your oil. It's embedded in men to protect and to provide. God created this in the fiber of men to do this. I remember the other day. I love scaring people. It's awful. I just love doing it. And so our friend was over, and sure enough, I scared her bad. She was coming down the hall, and I was kind of hiding by the bathroom, and she came by, and I scared her. Her reaction whenever I scare her is to push me or to hit me or to do something, so I always kind of block myself. Well, Renee was in the kitchen, and so when she came to sort of push me, Renee stepped in between us. And it was so funny because it was like a knee-jerk reaction of his. He wasn't like, hey, don't hit my wife, whatever. It was literally just his reaction to sort of step in between, to sort of protect me. And so something like that, someone doesn't need to teach men that. They do that by nature. God instilled this in him. And so I appreciate that Renee does take care and provide and protect in very physical ways. I'm going to change the oil of your car. The other day he cleaned my car, and that's great. And I said, yes, Renee, thank you so much, and I appreciate that. And I said, but could you help me with something? I need this. And I expressed to him gratitude, but I also expressed to him a need that I had. The second thing with questions is this. Oftentimes, husbands are scared to ask their wives questions because the wives will receive the question like, are you an idiot? Are you serious? What a stupid question. You're making excuses. You're doing this on purpose. And usually it shuts their husbands down. Wives, women, we need to create an environment where the questions asked are received. They're welcomed. They're wanted. I don't want Renee to feel like he's an idiot because he's going to ask me a question. I want him to ask his questions because it shows me that he cares for the answer. He cares for bettering our relationship. And this is what an abundant marriage is all about. We don't get it perfect all the time. It's not always successful. We go back and forth. We question. And he says, well, hey, I feel like I'm here doing your oil. Isn't this showing to you that I love you, that I care for you, that I'm protected? I said, yes, it does. And thank you so much. But this is what I need. And so this is a great thing to do with your husbands. Wives, remember, I always tell you, your husband is naturally a Bob the Builder, meaning he wants to problem solve. Men want to fix things. They want to give solutions and quick solutions. And sometimes we get so frustrated because sometimes when we come with our frustrations, our husbands want to give us a quick fix and a quick solution. If that's you, Bob the Builder husband, there's a live that we did, a video that we created specifically talking about this. But anyways, in my mind, and again, these are things that you will learn through the Abundant Marriage course, my mind goes here. If I attack Renee's character, this conversation is going to go nowhere. I understand that God created men to protect and to provide. I also know that Ephesians 5 says this, remember, husbands, love your wives. Meaning it doesn't come naturally for husbands to love us in the way that we need to be loved. Meaning the emotional intimacy. Okay? And so in that moment I thought, here's my husband who is very much Bob the Builder. Renee is a fixer. He's an engineer. So by nature he's already a fixer, and then by profession he's a fixer. He loves to solve things. And so I presented him a problem. I said, Renee, well, help me solve this. I know for a fact that you are not just with me because of sex. But I feel in this moment that you are with me just because of sex, even though I know it's crazy and it doesn't make sense and it's irrational. I know that. But can you help me? Can you help me solve this? Because I don't want to feel this way. I need for my feelings to connect with the fact, and the fact is that you are not just with me for sex. Because if you are, that's really expensive sex. And so immediately, you know what Renee does? Oh man, his mind starts to turn. And now I just gave him a problem that he wants to solve. Women, we need to have wisdom. And this is why, as we're going back and forth with Jesus, saying, Lord, help me explain this to my husband the way you would explain it to him. Remember, the Bible tells us that Jesus spoke in parables, and he did it for a reason. Jesus spoke to fishermen about fish. Jesus spoke to mothers about children. Jesus spoke to farmers about planting. Jesus spoke in parables. And so I want to speak the language that my husband is going to understand. And because he's a Bob the Builder, because he's a fixer, I am going to present a problem. And sure enough, he gives me a solution. He says, hey, tonight we're going to make time for us. And tonight, after you finish your recording, after you finish your live, we're going to spend time together. And I'm sorry, I am going to, start the cycle earlier. I'm not just going to wait a day or 2 days before I want to have sex to start being nice and kind and this. I understood it. I understand that we're in the standoff. And for us to have better, more enjoyable sex, that you need to feel loved and wanted. And you need for me to spend quality time. And Renee is very well trained in all of these words, okay? And so he uses, I said Renee could be a therapist on his own. And so I gave him a problem to solve, and he gave me a solution. I gave him a problem to solve, and he gave me a solution. And so guys, use this example so that you can bypass these frustrations and these arguments. And so after that, he gave me a solution, great, and we went on about our day. No silent treatment, no staying angry for the next week and the next month and the next year sometimes, which is what I used to do. Man, I used to get so upset and frustrated, and I wouldn't talk to him for the whole week. And it took us nowhere. And it just wasted time. It wasted time. It wasted time for resentment to build, for frustration to build. It didn't strengthen our relationship. In fact, it weakened our relationship. Any problem and any issue in any situation you are facing, you are a team. Go after it together. Find solutions together. Go through the steps, right? If you need to be silent, great. Be silent, but be silent for the right reason. Not to harm, not to attack, but so that you can stop, think, and reflect. So that you can go with Jesus and wrestle with the best way to approach this. To pick the best time to approach it. And then communicate your silence. Your husband does not do it on purpose. He genuinely might not know. He might not be as observant as you are. He might think you're being silent because, I don't know, you're praying or you're reading or whatever because you have something else in your mind. And then feeling versus fact. Write down what is fact and write down what is feeling because oftentimes they are at war against each other. Husbands or wives, learn to ask questions. And for the partner who is receiving the questions, don't make your spouse feel like an idiot for asking questions. Welcome those questions. And then wives, your husband is Bob the Builder. Give them a problem to fix. Give them a problem to fix. And finally, husbands, start the cycle early. The perfect standoff. You want sex. Your wife wants cuddles and she wants attention. She wants quality time. She wants vulnerable conversations. She wants to tell you about her dreams and her plans, and she's all about relationships. So start the cycle earlier because you know what? Then you'll get sex earlier. Does that make sense? More cuddles, more sex. More attention, more sex. She is going to be more apt, more ready to want to have sex with you. It's God created it so beautifully and so perfect. He created a want and a desire in the heart of man. And He created a want and a desire in the heart of women. And the women can fulfill that in the man, and the man can fulfill that in the woman. And it's perfect, and it's beautiful, and it's awesome. Anyways, if you guys have some questions right now for those who are just joining, if you have any questions right now, send it my way, and I can answer it to you. Or maybe you're saying, oh man, this is exactly what I experienced. I know, I've lost count. And how many wives will approach me exactly with that? I feel like my husband just wants me for sex. And the husband will look at her and say, what? Are you out of your mind? I don't just want you for sex. Of course not. Haven't I already proven? Haven't I already shown you? And maybe you have, husband, but maybe she is not understanding the language. You know, I'm thankful that Renee changed the oil of my car, but it definitely didn't give me butterflies in my stomach. And so let's learn to communicate with each other. You are on the same team. And we are on the same journey, you and I. The journey towards abundance. All right, guys, if no questions there, I am going to land this plane because remember, Renee promised me some time together. And so we're going to do just that. Keep following us on Instagram. Share this. You know that these videos stay up for 24 hours, and so share it. If you're just joining us now, if you missed it, that's okay. It's about to go on our IGTV. Take this opportunity to watch it by yourself or with your spouse. Send it to your family, send it to your friends, and join us in our stories, because I always ask questions. And with your questions, I bring up topics that are relevant to you so that we can bypass all of the wrong turns. All right, guys, I'll see you next week, Thursday at 8 p.m.